Okay, so George, on Saturday, Donald Trump brought his MAGA insurrection to Conroe, Texas. Now, the big takeaway seems to be the former president's plans to fight his legal problems outside of a court of law and in the streets. I mean, it's really fucking crazy. He encouraged people. It's beyond. So he encouraged people to engage in massive demonstrations in jurisdictions pursuing criminal investigations against him over January 6th demonstrations, as well as tax-related issues. Then, minutes later, he said that if he's reinstalled as president, that he would consider pardoning some of the January 6th Capitol rioters. Now, if you would, discuss with me how Trump's words constitute both a warning to Democratic lawmakers and an encouragement of his MAGA ground troops to sow chaos in the street should he be convicted of a crime.
Look, you know, a normal person would hire a good lawyer, but he can't do that because good lawyers won't work for him. So this is his trick. I mean, he's just doing the same thing he did leading up to January 6th. He's playing the persecuted victim and, inviting others to sort of fight on his behalf. Of course, he doesn't back them up. And now he's just, he's really losing it. I don't know what other thing to say about it. He totally is losing it. And, the third thing he did this weekend, which was kind of interesting, was he basically admitted that he was trying to overturn the election. So he had a real trifecta this weekend. With trying to incite people to rally on his behalf if he's prosecuted, promising pardons to insurrectionists, and then basically admitting that he was trying to, overthrow the republic. It's quite a trifecta.
Okay, so let's sort of break this down for a quick second. We've watched this Trump's bullshit line, right? If in fact that you punch that guy, I'll pay your legal bills. Now, we know that that's not true. We know that Correct. He doesn't pay legal fees. Just ask
Correct.
Me. Just ask Rudy Giuliani. Right. So to all of these folks that believe,
just ask any number of New York law firms.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that was part of my job, was fucking some of these law firms out of money that they rightfully, had earned. But he doesn't believe in paying anybody. But think about this for a second. That he claims that he's going to go ahead and pardon them for being part of the January 6th insurrection. I hope that they realize that it's just another Trump lie, that he's not going to pardon anybody, because once he becomes, if in fact that he would become president again in 2024, he's not even thinking about these people. In fact, he's not thinking about them today either.
He won't need them in 2024 if he gets reelected. And that's what everything is, as you can attest. With Donald Trump, everything's transactional. What can somebody do for him? So, some guy like Roger Stone gets his sentence commuted because Stone's an actual witness against him. And these people, they're not going to get the time of day. You're absolutely right. But the point, about what he's doing is he's going back. He's legitimizing January 6th in the way that he started to try to do on January 6th, but was held back from because of his fear of a backlash. He's glorifying what happened on January 6th. He's saying that January 6th was a great day, and that the November 3rd was the real insurrection. I mean, he's getting more and more blatant about how he feels about what happened on January 6th. And that's actually good news for prosecutors. His intent was to foment some kind of an insurrection or something, to intimidate the people on Capitol. Yeah, a coup, to intimidate. Really is the thing. Mike Pence and everybody else on Capitol Hill. He wanted that to happen. He watched it. As Stephanie Grisham said, he watched it with glee while it was happening.
Well, yes, and she probably should have said something at that time instead of declaring it much later. But this is so much, this campaign style rally in Texas was so much more than just about January 6th. In essence, what's he doing? He's now threatening prosecutors. He named him by name, Mark Pomerantz, claiming that because he's with Paul Weiss,
Hillary
that there's some
connection,
sort
yeah.
of connection between Paul Weiss and Hillary Clinton and so on. And he's basically warning them. What he did to me as well when he attacks you on, fortunately he doesn't have it any longer, that Twitter feed. He puts your life in jeopardy. He makes you think not once, not twice, but multiple times about whether or not you really want to pursue this, or do you have to worry that some fucking lunatic from, God knows where, who's wearing one of these, Trump swastika shirts, right? Camp Auschwitz, that these people will come looking for you. I mean, that's what he's doing. And he's trying to do it in the typical Donald Trump mob sense. Oh, I hope nothing happens, right? Of course you hope it happens.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking that last night. I was just thinking of, this is not behavior of a former president of the United States. It's the behavior of a mob boss. And at least, Tony Soprano had the decency to use code words and throw away cell phones. This guy just broadcasts it out in the public, and just lays it out there for everyone to see. And that's kind of part of how he gets away with stuff. He's so brazen about it that, normally you say that if somebody's hiding something and they cover up documents and they do stuff and they do something secretly, you can say, they knew that they were doing something wrong. And he just goes out there and just does things that are wrong and says things that are wrong and things that are just completely outrageous. And he gets away with it because he's so brazen about it, pretending that, he gets to live his big lie by pretending that the election was stolen. So therefore, he's justified in doing everything he can to overturn it or to complain about it. And the problem is, it's all a big lie. And everyone, maybe even some of his supporters know it. But the problem is it gives all these supporters and the people you're talking about the sort of the permission structure to act on what he's telling them, which is how we ended up with January 6th and how we could end up with some kind of violence again.
Well, he wants to sow the violence. He actually enjoys, the violence, especially if it's done in his honor. He takes it as this is some sort of a acknowledgement or an affirmation that he is something more than just the dumb fuck that he actually is, right? And what does he do? No, serious, George. What does he do?
No, you're absolutely right.
Goes,
it's classic, it's classic behavior of what the psychologists call and psychiatrists call a malignant narcissist. They are destructive, and they are destructive because they care about nothing other than their own egos, which are often very delicate, and they relish, trying to control people and the power of it. He loves the power that he feels when these people are just sucking it up and chanting, lock him up and lock her up or lock whoever up. And they sort of draw something from him because they feel a part of something. There's something in their lives that's missing. And it's this perverse and pathological symbiotic relationship that has led us to where we are today.
And we're in big trouble. And what he does too, cleverly, he's now enticing these folks to actually commit crimes, to be brazen, to go out there and to sow more chaos by dangling these pardons, in their faces to the right. Don't worry. I want you to do what you think that I think that I want to do. And which point, whatever happens to you, I'm going to run. And I still don't believe he's going to run. And I'm going to win. And when I do, right,
well, that's
this
interesting.
is his words. I mean, George, these are his words. If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. And I mean, you got to love his choice of words. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they're being treated, again, so unfairly. Right. This is all the repetition. It's the Stalinist, in him, where if you say it over and over and over again, people will believe it. And the people that believed him for January 6th, who really, some of them have real serious mental problems, they're actually thinking he's talking to them. And don't worry, we'll give you a pardon.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the Hitler big lie theory. I'm curious though. Now you said I could ask questions. Now you made me curious. Why do you think you said you don't think he's actually going to run? And I'm not sure I agree with that, but you have spent so much time with him, and you know how he thinks as well as anybody. Why do you think he's not going to run? Because he might lose, or what?
Because he knows he will lose, and as we both discussed, and we both know, because you know him, from many years ago, right? He has an insanely fragile ego. Yeah. And that's why he did not want to give up the office of the presidency, or in his case, the office of the dictator, simply because he would try to figure out how to stay on again and again and again without having to run. When you start seeing things like President Xi of China, when you start seeing Vladimir Putin, when you start seeing Kim Jong-un, they don't have to run for office. It is their office until they say it's no longer their office.
That's why he admires.
And that's what. Yes, and that's why he wants to be them. And that's why he's trying to hang on to power. But he knows he can't win. Look, do you really think that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis isn't going to run? Do you really think that Ted Cruz, who's, basically been kissing his ass day in and day out, isn't going to run? There's going to be more Republicans running in 2024 than there were when he was running, and there were 17 of them.
Yeah, but that
all of these people.
But that helped him in 2016.
No, it actually doesn't. He may end up making it towards the top, but at the end of the day, he's going to be so wounded by all of the things that they're going to be attacking him. All of them. Let's say there's 20 Republicans that are going to be running. Each and every one of them are not attacking Ron DeSantis or Ted Cruz or Matt Gaetz, assuming doesn't go to prison for for child molestation charges and so on. They're all going to be focusing on who? On Donald.
Well, let me play devil's advocate there. I mean, I would love to live in a universe where everything you just said comes to pass. But the problem in 2016 was, one of the problems was, the vote was split 16, 17 ways. He had the best name recognition, thanks to just being Donald Trump and, The Apprentice. And then the Republican Party rules had kind of made it easier for a front runner to run off with it by providing that people would get all the delegates if a winning candidate who are plurality could get all the delegates in particular states, after in March or April or May. And it just sort of accelerated an advantage of just having the best name recognition. And, if there are a lot of people who run against him in 2020, you could see a similar phenomenon. And then the other thing that has to happen is, people left him alone in 2016. They attacked each other because they wanted each to be the opponent to Trump. And then they thought they could go after Trump, but it was too late and Trump got a free ride. I mean, here are these people, and you mentioned Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is terrified of crossing Donald Trump. I don't know. DeSantis is willing to kind of poke a little bit. But, is he willing to sort of bet his political career in a one-on-one shot in 2020 when he's got 20, 30 years left as in a career because he's that young. So I just wonder whether or not the dynamic is going to be, Trump is going to be less popular than he was this year. He seems to be, his popularity in the Republican Party seems to be dropping somewhat, but he's still going to have a core of supporters that are going to carry him over the line no matter what. And others in the Republican Party are terrified of crossing that rabid fan base, if you will. I mean, look at what they were doing to Greg Abbott at the rally the other night. They were yelling "Rhino" at him because they thought he wasn't sufficiently pro-Trump or anti-vaccine or whatever it is their grievance was. So I'm just wondering. I mean, I hope that these cracks and these fissures that they were detailed in a nice New York Times article by Shane Goldmunker this morning, are going to widen up. But I just feel like, why haven't we seen that already?
Yeah.
But rest assured, between
the AG here in New York, the DA, the Georgia, the pick issues, and so on, he's going to be so wounded. He's going to be like a real wounded animal.
Well, we can only hope so. I mean, that the Mitch McConnells of the world want something to happen to him from the legal stuff. They all, secretly, that's what they all want.
Yep. The whole Republican Party
for him. Yeah, they are waiting for him to blow himself up. And then, but none of them wants to have their fingerprints on it.
Well, that's true. But let me ask you this, George. If you watch carefully, Trump read his rant about wanting protests directly from the teleprompter, right? Which means that he fully intends to incite unrest should he be criminally charged. And he is going to be criminally charged. How is this not akin to shouting fire in a crowded theater? I mean, the man is clearly intending for there to be violence, and he wants to use the mob as his weapon. I mean, is this not the literal definition of insurrection? I mean, could all of this come up in trial should Trump ultimately be tried for conspiracy? If you would, just discuss this with me.
I think for as far as incitement of future bad events, I think it's too early to say whether or not this could constitute incitement. I think you'd have to do more and it's more specific over a period of time. I do think, however, that the things he did this weekend actually could be used as evidence against him in connection with a prosecution of what happened on January 6th, because it shows his state of mind. The granting of pardons and the praise of the people, what they did on January 6th. That goes to exactly what was he thinking on January 6th when he basically sat in his private dining room watching TV in the West Wing and did nothing, even though people were calling him up and begging him. His daughter was coming down, and they were begging him, "You have to go out there and say something." And then he takes 3 takes of a video that wasn't all that great, and who knows what he said in the first 2 takes. I mean, and apparently he was reveling in what was happening. He wanted that to happen. So that goes to whether or not he was inciting what happened on January 6th. It goes to whether or not he breached some kind of a duty, which could conceivably result in criminal liability to stop the mayhem when it happened and when he was watching it on TV. And then the other things that he did over the weekend, it's the same modus operandi, as you point out. This inciting people to do things in the future to the prosecutors, same MO. And it's, as you're a lawyer. I mean, under the rules of evidence, similar acts in similar patterns can sometimes be admissible. And this is sort of like similar behavior. And then the third thing he did this weekend was that crazy statement that he had his spokesperson, Liz Harrington, put out, where he basically said a couple of times that, his object was to overturn the election. Well, I said on CNN this morning, somebody should read him his fucking Miranda rights. Okay.
Yeah, I watched. I did. I watched you say. 2 movies sort of come to mind when I was watching you discussing Donald's rally. The first one, right, is from Forrest Gump. I mean, stupid is as stupid does, right? I mean, it is just absolutely stupid, and it's inarguable. It is just mind-blowingly stupid is right. The second one really comes from the other night. I was out with a bunch of friends, and when I started talking about Donald and some of the stupid shit that he does, one of the things that they said to me, why do you think he's doing what he's doing? And it applies to this Texas rally as well. From the movie Batman, The Dark Knight, you remember there was a scene there where Alfred says to Batman, "Some men just want to watch the world burn." That's Donald. Because he lost the election.
Yes.
Donald Trump wants to watch the world burn.
That's malignant narcissism. That's classic malignant narcissism. And he won, and who even understood this? On February 13 of last year, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell gave a speech right after Trump was acquitted in the second impeachment trial. And he basically said, Trump, because he lost the election, wanted to do as much damage as he could on the way out. Absolutely right. That's absolutely what happened on January 6th. It's absolutely what has happened ever since. And if he can't win the presidency back again, he's going to torch the country. even in the process of, if you may be right, he may not be run, maybe he won't run, but he's going to want to, he's exacting revenge. That's part of what he's doing right now. And he wants to exact revenge on everyone who he feels has wronged him. And that's part of why he's endorsing he's attacking Liz Cheney. He's attacking any number of, he's attacking the governors of Georgia and Arizona because he felt they wronged him. I mean, everything for a malignant narcissist, a lot of what motivates a malignant narcissist is, vengeance. And that's Trump.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me about that. But,
yeah, no
part of the Trumpist party line is to valorize these January 6th rioters, not as rioters, but as freedom fighters. Now, midterm candidates like J.D. Vance have run with this narrative and made it central to their own personal campaigns. How ultimately successful do you believe that this will prove to be as a political strategy, with a majority of Americans polled wanting January 6th lawbreakers to be punished?
Well, I think it's a self-defeating strategy for the Republican Party, but at the same time, for individual candidates, it can be a worthwhile strategy. If your object is to win a primary that is dominated by Trumpy voters, and you are running in a district that is overwhelmingly Republican, your best bet is to play this card. I mean, J.D. Vance was no friend of Trump's just a few short years ago, and now he's become Trumpier than Trump. And that's what a lot of these candidates are doing. They basically either suppress any criticism they might have of Donald Trump, they go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring to try to get an endorsement, or they they engage in outrageous behavior, like J.D. Vance, who of all things is a Yale Law School graduate, like Stuart Rhodes. Sorry to say. And so the problem then is, well, where does that bring the Republican Party? If the Democrats are smart enough to basically play this the right way, which is to play it by saying, they're the insane party. You don't want this insanity running the government. So the Democrats have to run against this. And if they do, I mean, they're going to basically drive the suburban soccer moms away the way Trump did. And there's a reason why Trump didn't do as well as congressional candidates and other down ballot candidates in 2020. And at the end of the day, I think it does hurt the Republican Party, and particularly given the demographic trends, which aren't good. I mean, this is the cohort that really supports Trump is largely older. The older the Fox News viewer. These people who were marching on January 6th, a lot of them were out of breath because they're 55, they're our age, and they're not, sooner or later they're not going to be voters anymore, and this is alienating young people. So this is not who turned out in huge numbers to give Biden an enormous victory in 2020. It's a long-term self-defeating proposition for the Republicans, but the Republicans are too paralyzed and there's just too much of an internal cost to pay for Republicans to be able to do anything about it right now, which is why I said earlier that you basically have all these important Republicans who want to see something bad happen to Donald Trump, but don't dare have their fingerprints on it.
What's amazing is you use this term, that they traveled down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. Yeah. I want to tell you, and I want to tell my listeners,
or his ass.
I was actually, well, that's true, but I was the one that came up with that line. Do you know what this narcissist ended up doing? He pulled out the article that it showed up in first, circled it in big yellow. He wrote, and he goes, "Michael, you are the greatest. Great line. Constantly use it." I mean, he loved the notion of kissing the ring because it's a playoff of the Godfather.
Yeah, he's
right?
Like, Godfather.
Right. Yeah, Godfather.
You invited me to your wedding on this day of great,
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is just batshit crazy. But then I want to ask you to get out your crystal ball, so we could all wait for a quick moment as you take it out from underneath your desk.
I'm terrified by crystal balls because I just think everything's. But
Well, I
okay.
would like for you to take out your crystal ball
All
and
right,
then
I'll do
predict,
it.
if you would, the outcome of the midterm elections. I mean, it's something that I've asked all of my guests lately, because first off, how terrified are you of the inmates, and I know about this, taking over the asylum? And what does this country look like with someone like, I mean, fucking Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House? How much influence do you think that Trump will have then in legislating? And finally, are we that much closer to some kind of a showdown in the streets, as they will clearly shut down the January 6th committee and likely try to impeach Biden for imaginary crimes as some kind of a political payback? I mean, what kind of chaos are we really looking at next fall if this in fact happens?
Look, I think there's a decent chance the Republicans will take the House. I'm not sure about the Senate. It's possible they take both, but the House is what you have to watch, because that's where all the craziness will erupt, and they will do some crazy things. They will launch crazy investigations. I don't think they will do much serious legislating. I don't think Trump is capable, and Trump, in terms of Trump influencing that, he's not really interested in legislation. He doesn't, he never did much of it when he was when he was president. I mean, infrastructure, forget about it. I mean, the stuff that he got through Congress was basically Congress's doing. So I just don't know. Well, I don't know that he's going to have a lot of influence, but they're going to be kowtowing to him, and there's just going to be a lot of this performance art that seems to be dominating the Republican Party, where everybody just competes for attention so they can get fundraising dollars and hits on Fox. And it's not anywhere near serious governance, and there's going to be a division in a divided government, and it's just going to be partisan warfare for 2 years. And the only thing I can say the only good that I think could come out of it maybe is that people will see that the current Republican Party, at least especially the House version of it, is just so insane that you just can't vote for these people, even if you have qualms about the Democrats and their policies. But we'll see. I really don't want to predict too much. I do think there's a decent chance, as everybody else does, that the Republicans win the House. I mean, it's just a thin margin. It's an off year. Biden's not doing well in the polls, and then I mean, it's just, I don't know how many times out of 10, but usually the case that the party in the White House loses seats in the House.
Yeah, and what they always say is that the midterm goes to the party that's not in the House, meaning the White House, and much of it is always predicted back to the current president's approval rating. And I'm going to tell you, I have a very hard time sometimes reading these polls that come out where Biden's approval rating is not great. And one of the problems, for example, is you have to watch to see what these, what the GOP, what Fox, OAN, Newsmax, and all of these periodicals that are constantly attacking Biden. They even attacked him, which is what I think that they will try to impeach him on if, in fact, they take the House, is Afghanistan. They're going to claim that it was a complete fuck up, that everything went wrong, the whole bit. And the funny thing is, he was just finishing up Trump's leftover mess. But nobody wants to talk about that.
No,
and they're going to bring him up on everything, George. They're going to run him through the mill. And you're right. I'm not so sure that he will ultimately be convicted the same way that Donald wasn't twice. But nevertheless, it's political payback for what? Then, of course, let's not forget, if Trump has any say in anything at all, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Ukraine, that shit's coming right back to life.
Yeah, but there's nothing. The problem is there's not a lot there. And, I mean, they're going to do this. And I don't know that at the end of the day, it's going to do them much good. That's the thing, because they're not going to have anything. And people get tired of this. They're going to get exhausted of this. And I think, I don't think, the Benghazi didn't really do the Republicans any good. They spent a lot of effort on it, but nobody can, to this day, very few people can explain what the hell that was about. So I don't think, I think they're going to cause a lot of chaos. But I think at the end of the day, I think they're going to end up fighting themselves as much as fighting anyone. There's a tendency there. They are not these are not people who are interested in governance, and they don't even work well together. So I think that even if they win the House in 2022, I think they're going to end up doing themselves harm in the long run. But
a lot of people, though, George, would turn around if you were, a member of the GOP, they would turn around and tell you that you can use that exact statement that you just made when you're referencing the 2 impeachment trials against Donald, that it didn't do anything for the Democrats. In fact, it possibly hurt the Democratic Party.
Oh, that's right. And that's one of the reasons why Nancy Pelosi was sort of a latecomer to the impeachment bandwagon. It took the Ukraine matter for her to, pull the trigger on that. The multiple counts of obstruction that were identified at length in the Mueller report weren't sufficient. And, she was very much conscious of the fact that it takes an incredible amount of public support to impeach a president and remove him from office, because it's never been done. And people really have to be fired up in the public and understand exactly what's going on. And you have to grab their attention. And at the same time, it's going to be hard to get, in a polarized political environment, get 67 votes to convict in the United States Senate. So you're basically engaging potentially in a futile act. And she basically dragged her heels on impeachment for political reasons, for a long time, because she understood that her majority depended on these purple districts where there were Democrats who had won in rural and conservative districts. And so it took the Ukraine, the outrage of him extorting an ally, for her to basically say, we have to do this at that point. And I don't think she did it because she thought there was going to be huge political upside. I think she did it at that point because she couldn't not do it because of what he had done. So yeah, I don't think, impeachment, I don't think, is necessarily a political plus. It didn't help the Republicans in 1998 when they impeached Bill Clinton. And I don't know that, unless you have something that the public's truly outraged at, I don't think it will help the Republicans in 2023. That doesn't mean that, because there's not a political benefit to it, that sometimes it's right to, it doesn't mean that it's not right to impeach a president. It was right to impeach Donald Trump twice because he did commit high crimes and misdemeanors within the meaning of the Constitution. He did violate his oath of office twice. And frankly, if the Senate had done its job the second time around, if Mitch McConnell probably, looks back and rused the moment he decided not to encourage his fellow caucus members to vote to strip Donald Trump in the February 2021 trial of the ability to run for office in the future. That was a missed opportunity for him and for the Republican Party. It was also just the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, when I was talking about a poll about the coming midterm elections, the poll I was actually referring to is NBC had a poll whereby they believe that the Democrats are going to take a shellacking. And then they go ahead and they give like this little history lesson. As far as during the course of my life, there's only been, I think, 2 times where the party that was controlling the White House actually gained House seats. One of them, believe it or not, was President Clinton. And the other one was George W. Bush, who both had approval ratings north of 60%. So if you take a look to see where are we at right now with Joe Biden, he's somewhere in like the low 40s, 41, 42%. So my recommendation, if I was able to sit there and sit down with the guy, I would say, first and foremost, many of these messages from the White House that he's doing, it's too much. We came off of a situation where Donald never went before the camera unless it was something for, again, stroking his own ego, where he put up a big, gigantic sign of what the stimulus check was going to look like. And of course, the biggest signature, right, was like if it was on the Constitution, was Donald's signature at the bottom. Remember when he stopped Steve Mnuchin from having his name on the stimulus checks? because he wanted his, right? These are real issues. What he needs to do is in my estimation, he needs to get Merrick Garland on. There's so much misinformation, disinformation that's being put out there. There's so many individuals that have violated our Constitution, and they manage to just slide by. And I think that's eroding the country's faith in our democratic process. And it's giving the Foxes, the OANs, the Newsmax an opportunity to take advantage of that misinformation, to continue to promote it, continue to sow this chaos and so on. And interestingly enough, it has the opposite effect of what you would think, which is that people would walk away from that party of fucking liars and go to the party that actually wants to do something good for the country. But it's not happening that way.
Well, we'll see. I mean, your point about Garland, I fear may be right. I think the one bright spot in the near future, I think, will be these televised hearings from the January 6th Select Committee. I think that they are, some of the evidence is kind of filtering out now. They're dribbling a little bit out, but from what I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. And I think there's going to be I think if they do this correctly, and they seem to be very skilled at this, this particular group of people, they're going to tell a story about January 6th and about what happened in the 2020 election that I think is going to be captivating. And maybe it can be just, we can only hope it's a massive positive civics lesson for the country, particularly the people in the middle who kind of, think it's all just a lot of noise. And maybe some good can come out of that. And who knows, maybe it might affect the 2022 midterms, and certainly it might affect, Donald Trump's political future. Yeah,
well, one can only hope, but I don't have confidence in that. But I do want to say this, George. On Friday, you retweeted an interesting post from Juliet Kayyem that read, and I quote, "The fake electors investigation is like the dun-dun theme in Jaws. First slow, like it seems not a big deal, but then it picks up speed for the catch." Now, across multiple states, using the same language, lots of people were told to sign a document key to Trump's plan. It's the sound of dread. If you would, unpack what you think she means for my listeners, and how consequential will this wind up being? And will this be the final nail in the coffin for Rudy Giuliani?
Well, those are all interesting questions. I mean, I think what I'm actually in retrospect surprised that these fake electoral certificates didn't get as much play a year ago than they did, but there was just so much else going on. The violence on Capitol Hill and the attempts to launch objections on the floor of the House and on the Senate, and Trump's rhetoric that these fake electors meetings, which were viewed at the time as, oh yeah, this is just political show, kind of got washed away in all the noise, when in fact, when you submit a false document to the government, you're violating any number of federal laws when you do that. And you could be conspiring to defraud the United States. You could be violating the false statement statutes, 1001. There are any number of statutes that you could be charged with, including, again, the one charge that is being levied against many of the rioters on January 6th, which is attempting to obstruct a congressional proceeding. And these, with two exceptions, possibly a couple of states, they carefully said, this is contingent upon something or other, contingent upon finding that we actually won the election. These were basically copying the forms that you're supposed to use for the victorious electoral slate in a state where the presidential candidate actually won. And these things were false. And they were submitted to the National Archives. They were submitted to the Congress of the United States. They were filed in federal district courts under the Electoral Count Act throughout the nation. And, that's just illegal. And to get people to sign fake documents is conspiring to do that kind of is conspiring to engage in serial illegality. And I think you're right. I mean, this could be trouble for Rudy Giuliani. And it also could, I mean, to the extent it was done with Donald Trump's knowledge, which it probably was, because it was Rudy was doing it, and it was part of the plan that was laid out. They were cited in John Eastman's legal memo. This was part of a multi-pronged effort to disrupt and to prevent Joe Biden from being elected president by Congress by the counting of the electoral votes on January 6th. It was an attempt to obstruct that proceeding, and it was multifaceted. And this may actually be one of the easiest aspects of it to prove.
Well, that's the thing that frustrates not just my listeners, but it's frustrating all Democrats that are out there and all independents that are out there, that our Justice Department is so slow across the board when it comes to Donald Trump. For example, we already know here in New York, according to Tish James, that he overvalued his primary residence. And of course, because I used to live in a Trump building as well, right? He overvalued that property like 300%. He claimed it was 33,000 square feet. It's 11,000. He claimed it was worth 250 million. It was worth under 100. And he did it for the purpose of being able to inflate his personal financial statement, all for what? So that he can get preferential loans and rates when it comes to, insurance or borrowing money, right? That's a crime. So why are we worrying about everything else? Just when you have the meat, just put it on the fucking barbecue. Let's go. Yeah, it's like, what are you saving it for?
No,
and that to me is what's driving people crazy.
Yeah, I mean, anything he did, it's illegal to that, under New York state law would also, under the tax law or as bank fraud, and it would also violate, it would violate federal tax law or the mail or wire fraud statutes,
bank fraud, wire statutes, misrepresentation statutes,
all of it is just, there would be a corresponding federal charge to every potential state charge that probably that they're looking into. And why they've left it completely to the AG and to the district attorney's office is a grand mystery to me. I mean, I understand why it was done, until January 2021, but I don't understand why it was not. And I wrote a piece in the Washington Post not long that came out just after the inauguration. It basically said that what Attorney General Garland should do is appoint multiple special prosecutors, one to deal with the New York stuff, and one could deal with the Stormy Daniels stuff, one could deal with January 6th related stuff, and one could deal with Ukraine. One could deal with one would deal with also the obstruction that was dealt with in the Mueller report. I mean, there were just so many things that any of us. Anybody other than he would have been investigated to a fairly well for.
Well, I don't think you'd be investigated. I think you would be attached to a tree and executed. I mean, it's gotten to a point where
after a fair trial, Micah, after a fair trial.
Well, not if Trump has anything to say with that. But what ends up happening? People turn around, George. People turn around. They're like, wait a minute. What else does this motherfucker have to do before he's finally brought to justice? And the answer that they're saying is no one's going to touch him because he's the former president. And it's so unusual. We've never in this country been in a situation where the former president is being charged or is being investigated, I should say, into about 30 different crimes.
Yeah. And to basically let it all slide is to say that presidents and former presidents are above the law. And that's particularly true here in a circumstance where you're dealing with the one president of the United States who actually tried to end constitutional democracy in the United States by overturning a free and fair election and basically making himself president for life. So I'm with you there, Michael.
I constantly repeat this, and it's again worth re-noting. There was a time where he heard a statement that somebody made about Vladimir Putin. And that statement, if you take that statement and compare it to everything that's going on right now, it doesn't matter who you vote for. All that matters is who's counting the votes. And he used to say that in the office all the time.
That's
literally all the time.
That was Stalin. That was Stalin. Yeah, Stalin
Yes.
said that. Yeah,
yes,
it
but
doesn't matter
Vladimir Putin, but Putin has taken it to, of course, the extreme. Let's not forget.
All authoritarians, that's their belief. And
you recall, George, when you recall when, for example, Putin had he wasn't able to run because of the Russian Constitution. It was which was the 2 terms, and so he made himself into the prime minister. And then after that, they changed the rules that he could run as often as he wants, and he always wins by like 92%. It's always a landslide. That's what Trump wanted to do. And if people just listen to that one sentence, which is something Trump used to repeat over and over again, and then put into perspective what he's doing right now with the electoral votes, with going after governor's offices and redoing these electoral, counters and so on. This is what he's trying to do. He's setting it up for the future. And if he's not healthy enough, God forbid, we're going to have, Coke sniffing Don Jr. all over the place, right? Don Jr. will run, or your Princess Barbie Ivanka, or one of them will end up running. Not Eric, he's too stupid. But, even his father will ultimately admit that to himself. But he'll designate somebody so that he could be the king, from Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. I hopeful that none of that ever comes to pass. I don't think any of them are capable of doing that. But he certainly wants to rig the game in his own favor. That's what he's spent his entire life doing.
My God, who better be really careful, George? People like Bezos, people like Elon Musk, and so on. Because the first thing Donald would do if he took over, he would do exactly what Mohammed bin Salman did, what Vladimir Putin does. He would go to Elon Musk and he would say, Elon, how much are you worth, Elon? What's your net worth now?
That's a nice company you have there.
So he'll turn around, he'll go, about 300 billion. He'll go, try again. How much do you think you're worth? So he'll go, no, 300 billion. He goes, you're worth 10 billion. I just took 290. And he'll do that to Bezos and everyone else, very much like what Mohammed bin Salman did. He'll put them in the Ritz-Carlton, hanging them upside down, and do whatever he needs to do in order to have them sign over their wealth. That's what he wants. He wants to be the richest man in the world. He wants to be the most powerful man. He is batshit crazy. Which brings me to this question to you, George. Last week, Norm Eisen wrote an op-ed for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that outlined the historic task ahead for the grand jury convened by DA Fannie Willis. Now, Eisen further goes on and he writes, and I quote, "This ability to fully investigate and subpoena evidence is critical because the publicly available evidence may support charging Trump with several crimes under Georgia election law and other criminal statutes." How strong a case against Trump is there in Georgia? And where else could he find himself in similar legal jeopardy for this kind of election fraud?
Well, the Georgia case is quite remarkable because he was recorded on tape asking for a specific number of votes, saying, all I need is 11,000, I think it was 780 votes. That's just one more than we, lost by. And that's just that was just batshit crazy thing to ask for. And Raffensperger recorded that. And there are, to Norm's credit, Norm has done a great job. He and some other people for the Brookings Institute wrote basically this tome explaining how all of these things could violate Georgia law. And it's a pretty substantial case that could be brought there. So I hope that I'm hopeful that the special grand jury that is going to be impaneled this spring in Fulton County, pours through all of this and gets through all of this.
And yet it goes right back to what we just finished talking about. We're all fucking exhausted. It's
It is
called
exhausting.
Trump. It's called Trump fatigue, right?
Absolutely.
And what we're all tired of. How many more hearings are we going to have? How many more of these? He's fucking dead. He's dead in the water. They wait till they impanel this and so. And then somewhere along the line, new chaos comes up, and then there's a new investigation, and then they're going to find that there's, of course, no text message or emails because he doesn't do that, but you're going to get 50, 60 people coming up talking about what he was doing on January 6th, why he waited 187 minutes before, going out there and making the stupid statement that he did. But George, last week, Politico revealed the existence of a stunning executive order that was actually never signed, but showed the extent to which Trump would have gone to stay in power. Among other actions, it ordered the seizing of voting machines by the Department of Defense. I mean, it's described as a literal fucking coup. Who drafted the memo is still a mystery, although it's been widely ridiculed as being riddled with typos and formatting errors and basically drafted in crayon. Now, if it's drafted in crayon, we know who did it, right? Still, the content of the memo is terrifying, right? I mean, it is. It's fucking terrifying. What does it say to you about what is going on behind the scenes at the time? And how do you think the existence of this memo will ultimately help the January 6th committee?
Well, I think what was going on at the time were that the inmates were running the asylum. And there was a rear guard action by, I think, people in the White House counsel's office and maybe at the Justice Department to stop it. But, people like Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn were, running loose in the White House. Mark Meadows was allowing these people to suggest these crazy ideas into the ear of a crazy president. And I mean, the notion that a document would be generated that's in the White House files that would contemplate such things, which have basically no basis in law, would violate many laws. It would basically violate the Constitution. The notion that any of this could even get the light of day in the West Wing is just, it's insane. And I think that, I think one of the things the January 6th committee is going to be able to shine a light on is just the level of craziness that, Trump had reached and others around him had reached, and how nutso some of these people were. And it's just scary that some of people who are advancing this stuff could have, were anywhere near the White House grounds.
Near it? They were sitting in the office with him.
Office. I understand.
Let's just add to that list Steve Miller, Steve Bannon. I mean, Jared, who was out there. Jared is the same narcissistic sociopath that Donald is. Ivanka married her father, just obviously a whole lot thinner. And it's crazy simply because he doesn't give a fuck about anything other than now working with Middle Eastern money for his hedge fund. I mean, this guy is one of the worst fucking businessmen in New York, making some of the worst real estate deals. And somehow he pulls together over $2-3 billion into a hedge fund. Get the fuck out of here. I mean,
that's
this
a
is
mystery
insane.
to me.
Well, it's not a mystery. It's somewhere along the line. It's payback for probably selling the Middle East, armaments at a reduced price, because Jared flew there a handful of times completely off the radar. I mean, this is what he does. He creates this internal group of fucking grifters that each and every one of them are thinking not about the United States of America, but about enriching themselves. And we will pledge our fealty to the Fuhrer, to the supreme leader, so long as we're able to get ours. I mean, it's so crazy. It reminds me of like the movie Young Frankenstein. You remember there was that line, it's the nonsensical rantings of a lunatic mind? That's Donald. I mean, and the more crazy shit that he keeps spewing, the more that group of sycophantic followers of his, they just stay the course and they continue to fight for him. Like, again, if they were fighting for, their religious rights, for their God. Scary shit.
Well, let me say this. I want to say something nice about Jared, relatively nice. I mean, I'm not a fan of Jared's and what, a lot of what I believe a lot of negative things about Jared. But what I think was interesting about Jared in late 2020 and early 2021 is he basically absented himself from all the Stop the Steal stuff. He knew how crazy it was. And, he took one of his trips to, I think, the Middle East, just to get away from it all. And he made damn sure he had nothing to do with January 6th. And, he knows how crazy his father-in-law is. And he just was there along for the ride to see, what he could get out of it.
100%. Okay. So big picture time now, George. After all the dots are connected about who was involved in January 6th, it's my belief that it will prove that Trump presided over a vast criminal conspiracy to overturn the election. Now, when his own people inside the government failed him and then the courts rejected him, he now turned to the mob and incited an insurrection. Even if this is proven, what will be the political outcome, in your opinion? Are there enough persuadable voters who aren't already outraged that this will cause an uproar? Because short of referring Trump to the DOJ for criminal indictment, what's the desired outcome for you here?
No, to make sure this guy never gets near the Oval Office again. And I think that, if all of this stuff comes out and is understood and presented well to the American people about January 6th, what happened in 2020 was this massive, massive turnout to make sure he didn't stay in office. And I think that if Trump were actually to run and become the nominee of the Republican Party, which you question, and I hope you're right, but if that were to happen, I think you'd see a similar groundswell. And I think you'd be able to elect my dog president if she were running against Trump in 2024. But that said, it's going to be a very traumatic campaign. He's going to try to take down as much of the country with him as he can, and cause as much disruption and chaos as possible, because that's just his deal. He wants to see that, and so we'll see.
Yeah, sickness. But George, as I said to you earlier on, the hour goes by very, very quickly. So I have one last question for you. And I want to change gears for a moment and discuss the strange romance, this bromance that some members of the far right have with Russia and Vladimir Putin. From what I understand, there is a belief that Russia and Putin are somehow the saviors of white Christianity. Now, in an important piece from The Atlantic that you retweeted by Ann Applebaum, she writes, and I quote, "Their motives are curiously familiar. All around them, they see degeneracy, racial mixing, demographic change, political correctness, same-sex marriage, religious decline. The America that they actually inhabit no longer matches the white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant America that they remember or think that they remember. And so they have begun to look abroad, seeking to find a spiritually unified, ethnically pure nations that, they imagine, are morally stronger than their own. Nations, for example, such as Russia." Now, I was hoping that you could unpack this for my listeners and discuss how this impacts the viewpoint of folks like fucking Tucker Carlson, who's absolutely insane.
I mean, Ann Applebaum is just a terrific journalist and a terrific writer about authoritarianism and the dangers and threats to democracy. And the point she makes there is a good one, and it's consistent with what other scholars point out. When you have an authoritarian or fascistic movement that's undermining democracy, and one of the things they do is they create an image. They try to create an image of a past glory that a nation had that it needs to reattain. I mean, Hitler did it in the 1930s by talking about the stab in the back theory. I mean, he's trying to bring a nation back to its rightful place in history. And you see a lot of that nostalgia in any kind of group that becomes sort of attached to a charismatic authoritarian leader. I mean, that's the whole red hat thing was make America great again. And that was what that was about. And part of it also is they look abroad. They often look abroad for examples and models that they say, look at this utopia in this other country. I mean, it happened with the left, the authoritarian left in the United States. The communists, would glorify the Soviet Union and leave apart the fact that Stalin killed tens of millions of Ukrainians and Russians, and leave apart, the oppressive nature of the Soviet regime. There is this desire and necessity to create some kind of a utopia that is the aim of the object of the political movement. And here, it's crazy as it is. Some people are glorifying Russia, and in particular, they're also glorifying. And Tucker Carlson's guilty of this in particular. I mean, he did a bunch of shows from Hungary. They're glorifying Orban, and Trump is praising Bolsonaro. I mean, these birds of a feather, they flock together in this way, and they look at each other and point to each other as this is the success we can have if you only follow what I say. And the dear leader approach, this authoritarian approach to politics that is enchanting to people who don't want to think deeply about politics and don't want to think about how messy life in a democratic republic necessarily is.
George, there's a big problem with even the things that Tucker Carlson, is repeating. I mean, this whole notion of political correctness, right? This degeneracy, racial mixing, demographic change, political correctness, things like religious decline, right? So basically, they're looking to try to create some sort of again, ethnically pure nation. The problem is nobody today, or almost nobody, few people are actually ethnically pure. There's mixture from all over the place, and it doesn't make a difference, where you're from. I mean, myself, my father born in Poland, my grandmother Argentina. My my great grandmother was from Odessa. There's mix all over the place. There is no ethnically pure. This concept really doesn't exist unless you're one of these indigenous tribes that are living inside of the rainforest. It just doesn't exist, and even they intelligently go to other tribes so that they don't end up with ethnically pure nations. Because as we all know, bad things happen when you're marrying your own relatives. There are issues that pop up.
Stop attacking Rudy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. It's nuts. The whole thing is crazy, and I don't understand why people in America are following. But George, let me thank you as always.
This was a lot of fun, Michael. It's been too long.
I really appreciate your time. It's good to be able to see you again. It's been a long time. Send my love to everybody, please, and stay in touch.
Be good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, George.